Good evening. Welcome to this 96.3 WHUR and WHUT TV Get Out the Vote Town Hall Special. We are now just under 2 weeks before Election Day. 30 million Americans have already taken advantage of early voting or have cast their ballot by mail. This has been a very contentious election, and if experts are right, things could get even testier in the days ahead. We have heard allegations of voter fraud, voter intimidation, and suppression, and even reports that Americans are simply stressed out about this presidential race. Tonight, we go in on voting. What you need to know to make sure your vote is heard and counted. Don't just talk about it, vote about it. This program was originally live streamed yesterday on the WHUR network. However, we wanted to share this important conversation with you, the WHUT viewing audience. For the next hour, we will share conversations conducted with two nonpartisan expert panels. We begin with a look at voter integrity and protection. What are your rights as you head to the polls, and what's at stake? Here's our first panel. Dr. Dana Williams, chair of the Howard University Initiative of Public Opinion, a coalition of Howard experts that speaks on politics, economics, and education. Damon Hewitt, executive vice president of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and Diotha Sweat, president of the Charles County, Maryland NAACP. Thank you all for joining this conversation. We appreciate it. I want to start with voter intimidation, because certainly that is, one of the things that has been that has been critical to this conversation. I want to start with you, Damon. What would you consider the difference between, for example, intimidation and electioneering, for example, because there have been so many examples lately of intimidation, including, guns at the polls and the like?
So look, when it comes to voter intimidation, voters really have to trust their instincts, right? Just people have to trust your instincts. So if someone's following you all around the polls, if they're taking photographs of you, if you see them jotting down things about your movements, if they have a weapon, especially what you see on television, these long guns, those are all different forms of intimidation. Now, you're going to encounter all kinds of different people at the polling site if you vote in person on election day, or even if you vote early. Sometimes you'll see some of the partisan people passing out their literature, but they're supposed to be, in most jurisdictions, 100, 500 feet away from the actual polling site itself, from the entrance, right? So they have to be away a certain distance. They cannot follow you inside. They can't walk around with you inside. If you see someone confront you and ask you questions about your eligibility or what have you, and they're not an election worker especially, then those are all forms of intimidation. And so those are just, you have to really trust your instinct. When you're walking down the street, when you're walking around a neighborhood, when you're walking to someplace you're not familiar with. We have what they call mother wit, right? And when something feels wrong to you. And if it feels wrong to you, there are two things you can do. First, you can talk to the actual election officials who are on site, but also you're not alone there. You can call the Nationwide Election Protection Hotline that we lead at the Lawyers Committee. It's 866-OUR-VOTE. 866-OUR-VOTE is just a name to remember, and plug that into your phone, and you can call us and we can help you on the spot in real time.
Now, to that point, because we've been hearing about the 866-OUR-VOTE for quite some time on this program for years, but clarify for us exactly what happens if something is happening at the polls. Again, the Washington Post, for example, reporting guns at the polls, the president encouraging his supporters to poll watch. That's what he has suggested. But if something is happening at the poll and I decide that I want to call 866-OUR-VOTE, what does that trigger?
So what happens is the call is answered by a volunteer attorney. We have up to election day, we have, I think the current number is 34,000 volunteer slots filled from attorneys all around the country. Really proud of the attorneys stepping up, including the National Bar Association, the nation's black bar, all around the country stepping up to be part of this effort, including a lot of Howard Law School alumni, in fact. The dean of the law school is on our board. We're proud of the affiliation. So the attorney volunteers will categorize the incident in terms of tiers. Obviously, if it's intimidation, it's a top tier. And then that goes straight to our command center, where we have attorneys from the Lawyers Committee and other affiliated organizations in this 200 plus organization election protection coalition. And we work what we can to address the issue on the spot. We also have partnership with attorneys and activists who are on the ground in communities. If we need to mobilize, we can mobilize. The most important thing, though, Harold, is that voters don't get intimidated to the point where they don't actually cast their ballot, right? That's the whole purpose. The purpose is to frustrate you being able to cast your ballot. So we don't want people to leave. We want people to tell the election officials, we want people to call the hotline. And what we'll do is we'll put in place through our connections, whether it be with the powers that be, elected officials, or whether it be with the appointed election officials, we'll try to get those people removed, get those obstacles removed, and address any situation that comes up on that day.
Dr. Williams, we have less than 2 weeks before Election Day. What is the thing that concerns you the most right now?
Voter suppression. Really, I think very concerned about whether or not people will be able to vote once they arrive to a particular polling site, whether they will have to have a provisional ballot, whether or not they will be sent to a different polling place. And then finally, I think we have to be concerned about the election pre-transition on every on every level, whether it is if this matter goes to the Supreme Court, or even if it doesn't go to the Supreme Court. I think we also have to be concerned about the transition of power. But foremost, I'm thinking about how will those counties at the local level and those state houses really put forth every effort to try to suppress the vote. And we have to just be very diligent to avoid any attempts at disenfranchisement, understanding completely that it is a civil right that we all have as American citizens, and it's something that we absolutely have to take seriously. And the very simple thing that we have to prove that is to say, if it were not something that were to be taken so seriously, why would someone try so hard to take it from you?
And I was about to speak to that, because obviously, even with, as of today, more than 33 million people voting, there are still some people who are not. And so taking the vote seriously remains a concern, particularly in our community, Dr. Williams.
No, I would agree. And we have to do everything that we can as individuals to work within those communities that we have affinities with. So it won't be enough for me to vote. And interestingly enough, that's part of what I have heard as the rationale. There are many reasons for Kamala Harris to have been chosen as vice president elect, or I'm getting ahead of myself, as the nominee for Joe Biden. But one of those, high among those, people assumed that she would get Black women mobilized, and Black women especially, who we know can be trusted in terms of who they say they will vote for and going to the polls. But we are also likely to bring 4 and 5 and 6 people with us. So we don't have the option to say, well, I voted and I can't be concerned about my neighbor. I can't be concerned about the other people in my community, because we'll all be impacted negatively or positively by casting our votes.
Diotha, we have heard reports of early voters, at least one instance of an early voter who had on a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, not being allowed into the polling place. And this isn't about electioneering and someone passing out campaign material within 100 feet of the polling place. This is a voter with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Is that legal?
Is it legal to deny them access to go into the polling place?
Yes, with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt.
No, it is not. They are not an employee of the Board of Elections. It is not derogatory in nature. So no, that individual, as we stated earlier, should call the 886 our vote number, because this is a form of voter suppression that we need to know about across the nation so that we can be aware of things like this happening and we can combat it and have people on station.
But with that being a consideration, particularly in our community, where there are all kinds of, dare I say, shenanigans that may get in the way of someone attempting to exercise their right to vote. Should you pay attention to, for example, what you may be wearing on the day that you go to vote, early voting, or on November 3rd? Should you decide, no, I'm not going to wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. I'm not going to wear my Kappa fraternity shirt. I'm not going to wear anything that is suggestive of which way I may be leaning one way or another, so that I can get in and make sure that my vote, or my right to vote, is protected?
Well, I'll jump in and just say that's crazy to tell people that you can't wear certain gear, and that's not something we're going to do for our part. There's a broader mission. It's not just casting a ballot. It's making sure that Black voices, Black votes, and Black vitality matters, right? So bring your whole self to the party. The only thing that's legally prohibited is the electioneering. So if you're wearing a campaign shirt of your favorite candidate, I wouldn't wear it if it's for this office or for this race or for a prior race or even for a future race. Just don't do things like that. But wearing a shirt about Black Lives Matter is not it. Now, if you come in wearing something that is a specific campaign slogan, if you, for whatever reason, if somebody in your audience decides to wear a MAGA shirt, then that would be a problem, because that is an actual campaign slogan. Potentially in some jurisdictions, you at least have somebody asking you questions about it. Doesn't mean you can't walk in. And I hope nobody in your well, I'll leave it at that. I'll be nonpartisan about it. But at any rate, the point is, Black Lives Matter is a philosophical statement, but it is not an electoral exercise to wear such a T-shirt or any kind of gear like that.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things, and this is for Diotha. You're in Charles County, but we have, not only in this region, but state to state, the rules change. They're different. If I'm voting in Maryland, they may be different than they are if I'm voting in Virginia, or if I'm voting in Florida, or if I'm voting in Georgia. For those people who are not really familiar with the rules of voting, isn't it time, Diotha, for people to really take this seriously, to step up and know what is and is not legal in their state?
Absolutely. And as a president in Charles County, we pride ourselves in educating the community as much as possible, because what we find is that people do not know the rules. And when we don't know the rules, we just kind of haphazardly just do things. And so it is the responsibility of the people, such as organizations like the NAACP, the ACLU, and other organizations, to make sure that they're exhausting all resources to ensure that the people that are in those communities, they are aware what the rules are, and make those rules available as much as possible, especially in a time such as this, because every vote matters. And so we cannot allow people to come to the polls and not be able to vote because of a violation of a rule. And so we must educate the community. We must get back to talking about politics and what is and what isn't at the dinner table when we're meeting together on our Zoom meetings with families. We have to bring politics back into our conversations, because not knowing is not good enough.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Williams, one of the other things that we have seen recently, we've seen so many questions raised about mail-in voting. We've seen questions about the special boxes where your mail-in vote is for that's specifically dedicated to mail-in voting. Are you concerned? For example, there was a report out today that someone who tried to use a regular mailbox, the mailbox was full, and that people were leaving things on top of the mailbox. I can't imagine why anyone who respected or cared about their individual vote would even do something like that, whether it be their vote or a card for grandma.
Yeah.
What concerns you about that? And what should people do if they come across a stuffed mailbox? Isn't it time to take your stuff and drop it off at the Board of Elections?
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, and appreciate this conversation around making a voting plan. And I know you'll talk to Reverend Dr. Wesley in the next segment, but I think we can't emphasize enough how important churches are in this moment. So I'm at Metropolitan AME, for instance, and every week without fail, we're reminding people, make a voting plan. And not because we're trying to be partisan, but because we know that people take information seriously from places that they trust. And there are few places in Black communities that people trust more than Black churches. So part of that plan has to be, if I go to a location and it turns out I can't drop it off, while you're out, you should have like, what's my alternate location? So of course you do, what's the one that's closest to me? What's the alternate? What do I do if it looks suspicious? What do I do if I decided, because I don't believe any of this, or because I couldn't drop off, do I need to keep my ballot? Do I put it in the mail? So you need to know everything from what's the deadline from when your ballot has to be postmarked, how many signatures do you have to have? Because in many states, you have to have a witness that essentially verifies that you are who you say that you are. You have to ask questions about whether or not it'll be counted if it arrives late. Can it be opened in advance? How many days after the election will your state or local official open ballot? So all of these things I think you have to know. And then if you have it and you can make an alternate voting plan and you decide, I want to vote in person, you also need to know what you need to do in order to be able to cast a ballot in person if you decide to vote early. I, for instance, requested my mail-in ballot just because I had no idea where we would be in this moment. Honestly, as soon as it was a possibility for me to request a ballot, I requested it because I thought, if it comes down to it, and I think Maryland is relatively safe, but you never know, if there are any circumstances, what do I do? But I also have some skepticism about the mail-in ballot process, even in Prince George's, for a number of reasons. So I had to look it up. What do I do? If I want to vote in person now, what do I do? And so part of making that plan was knowing I must take that ballot that was mailed to me to the place where I am trying to vote in person. Otherwise, I'm forced to have a provisional ballot, for instance. So the best thing you can do is be educated. You can go to vote.org. You can go to Fair Fight. There's so many places that you can go to figure out exactly where's your polling place, what are the rules for your jurisdiction, and what, importantly, I mean, the crucial thing, I can't emphasize this enough, is what is your voting plan? And in the same way that you wouldn't have a plan that was just like plan A, you need a B, C, and D. This is too serious not to have a real serious plan and bring other people with you. Make sure that everybody you know has a plan as well.
Damon, you want to piggyback on the voting plan thought?
Well, it's crucial. You know, I mean, we've been saying all along, some people have said, oh, we have to all vote by mail. That's great for some people, but we know in the Black community, a lot of us don't do that typically, right? And there's a lot of obstacles. It's new. And, you know, for some people, this is not a time to do something new. It's a time to do what's trusted. And so we fought to make it, to have safe conditions for people who want to vote in person, even on election day. My parents in Louisiana do the early voting. That's how they've been doing it for years, since it's been more widely available. So, you know, we need to have options, but you always have to have, just like Dr. Dana said, you have to have your plan A, your plan B, your plan C. If you leave all your eggs in one basket for election day, you better have a multifaceted plan for that day too, where you pack yourself a lunch, you pack yourself something to drink, and you have a plan for the restroom if you have to go to the restroom a lot. And you have, you know, your way to get back in line and what have you, because you may be waiting for some time because of the demand, because of the interest, because there have been some changes to polling precincts in the number of jurisdictions. But plot it out, ahead of time, and it's going to be hard to go wrong if you have the right information under your belt before you go out.
You know, Diotha, one of our viewers for the town hall says you should know the demographics of your polling place. Does that matter?
Well, right now, that is a little different for COVID-19 election, because a lot of the districts have been compiled together. So where in Charles County we had usually we have upwards of 50 districts, but now we only have 8 locations to vote. So that, and under normal circumstances that may be feasible to do, but with COVID-19 that's not. So we're telling people in Charles County to vote at the nearest location if you would like to vote in person. If not, we're asking the individuals to drop their ballots off at the nearest drop boxes. And for those that do not trust the drop boxes, we're asking them to go directly to the Board of Elections drop box to do that. But with COVID-19, a lot of rules are different, and we have to be flexible. And that's why it's important that people such as the NAACP, that we must be the advocates that we're supposed to be, to make sure that the people that are in the communities know exactly what they're doing. And one thing that we have done is that in a touchless environment with COVID, we came up with the one-stop shop flyer. And so we put a QRC on the flyer. And so the individual can scan the flyer. And when they tap on the flyer on their phone, it takes them directly to the Board of Elections for Charles County. And so all of the questions that they have can get answered with the touch of this tapping their screen on their phone. So we have to be creative with what we're doing to make sure that every generation feels comfortable with going and casting that ballot. And our youngest and our millennials, we need to make sure that they're aware of what's going on, how they can vote, and why it's important that more than ever that their vote really does matter.
Mm-hmm. And another one of our viewers to the town hall, Teresa, she was saying, how can you know the demographics? And I will say that when Odessa, the other viewer, Teresa, was talking about demographics, she put it in quotation marks, which goes to the heart of what Diotha was saying. The demographics, the culture of the community where you vote. In other words, your nearest voting precinct. You know that if that's where you've been living for a while, then you understand that this is your community. And that's what she means by demographics. I don't think she was talking so much about race or gender, but the community, the cultural demographics. I wanted to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is a special town hall. We're addressing the vote. Get out the vote. We have less than 2 weeks before Election Day. We're saying don't just talk about it, vote about it. We have experts from the activist community, from the political community, all of this nonpartisan tonight. We're not trying to tell you who to vote for, but we are trying to tell you that you should. And we're also trying to tell you the best way that you can so that your vote and the vote of your friends and your family can be protected. Very, very important in this case. One of the things that, with so many people already, Damon, voting right now, more than 33 million, does that put a strain on the resources that your organization and others like yours have to make sure that the vote is fair?
Well, it certainly does put a strain. And so what we do, we rely on people like your audience to volunteer. We have 2 different types of volunteers. Many are lawyers, and we have over, I mentioned, 30-some thousand odd attorney volunteer slots already filled. We've received over 100,000 calls from voters just in the last few months alone. And so, it's the numbers are ticking up. We're getting to 5,000-7,000 a day the last few days. And so those numbers are going to keep increasing. And so we've hired any number of short-term and long-term staff. There's probably something like between 30 and 40 people in our organization that are focused 100% on this. And we're going to add another 20 to 30 people who will be doing at least some of the election protection work in the next week and some change. But we also have just that armada of volunteers, and they come from all walks. They come from the law firms, a couple hundred law firms around the country. They come from people who just hang up their own shingle as private lawyers, especially our Black lawyers around the country who are doing that. They also come just from people who just care and have concern. They vote and they want to vote early so that they can then be of service as we run up to election day. So we appreciate all of their efforts. Corporations too. Some corporations have donated time from their corporate legal departments to even volunteer for this effort. So it is a strain, and people are working very long days. We're all we're physically exhausted, but we're mentally, emotionally focused on what we have here. Yeah. And just one last thing I just want to say too, it doesn't end on election day. It doesn't start election day. It's already started. And it also doesn't end on election day, because in many jurisdictions, the vote will not be final.
Yeah.
Right. Because all the votes won't be counted because there's so many mail-in or absentee and what have you. So we'll have this hotline open even after election day because people may still have questions and have things to report in circumstances that need some attention.
Dana, I'll let you have share a final thought with us.
Sure. I think it's really important not only that we make the plan to vote, but that we're really clear about what we're voting for. Don't just focus on the presidential election. I think it's very important, but think about those down ballots as well. Every county has some local elections going on. We have bond issues going on. So go to the websites of every candidate that you're considering voting for. I don't know how many folks who are watching now are undecided. They may not be undecided about the presidential election. We have some incredibly important Senate races that are coming up. So make good decisions so that it's not that you're voting for the sake of voting, but you're voting in your own interest as well.
Mm-hmm. Diotha, can you share a final thought with us as well?
The one thing we want all voters to know is to commit to voting, and not just vote. Commit and know why you're voting, and most importantly, have a plan, because at the end of the day, you may be in line 6-7 hours, and we want you to stay in line. So bring a chair, bring a book, bring your medication if you take medicine. Make sure your cell phones are charged fully. Please commit to voting and have a plan for election day if you decide to vote on November 3rd. We're encouraging as an NAACP to vote early and to use the ballot boxes if possible. But if you want to vote on election day, please commit to having a plan. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for sharing your final thoughts in panel one. Great conversation. We really, really appreciate it. I want to thank our first panel of guests for sharing their time and expertise. Now, we're going to switch gears to talk about the Get Out the Vote efforts and how safely to do that in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic. Let's bring in our second panel of experts as we look at getting voters to the polls on November 3rd. We have Natasha Murphy, who is the Chief of Staff for Black Girls Vote. We have the Reverend Dr. Howard John Wesley, pastor of Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia, and Michael Franklin, Executive Vice President of the Howard University Student Association. I want to thank all of you so much for sharing with us in this really important conversation. I want to start with this question, and Natasha, I'll start with you. We have some 33 million Americans who have already voted. Mm-hmm. That's 20% of the voting population, and that's actually 10% of the entire U.S. population, approximately. There's a push to get out the other 80%. From your perspective, what's the plan?
Sure. So from Black Girls Vote's perspective, we are all about engaging, educating, and empowering Black women and other women of color to use their vote as their voice. And recognizing that election 2020 is going to be unprecedented in so many ways, we've really been focused on encouraging folks to cast their ballots via the vote by mail process, recognizing that it's likely the safest way for them to participate in democracy this go around.
But Natasha, the president says that the vote by mail is full of foolishness and craziness, and it's rigged. So, how do you fight that kind of disinformation?
Yes,
and your constituency to say, hey, look, I am going to do it that way.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely a lot of rhetoric and misinformation around the safety and accuracy of the vote by mail process. But I think it's really important to combat that with straight facts. The concerns around voter fraud and votes not being counted or rejected is just not being seen or experienced in this election, as well as previous elections in the jurisdictions across the country that have been using vote by mail for quite some time. So here at Black Girls Vote, we've definitely been encouraging our members and our supporters to cast their ballot, turn their mailbox into their ballot box. And so far, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from folks participating that way.
Mm-hmm. Pastor Wesley, as we know, the Black church has always been the cornerstone of activism in the Black community, and we are in really unusual times. Your church and so many other churches across this country are essentially closed, although there are virtual services and virtual participation. How do you continue to get the word out? How do you continue to have voter registration drives when the physical doors of the church are closed?
Well, I think there are a couple avenues for us. One, we still have our online worship, and thankfully, even though COVID has shut our church doors, our viewership is astronomically high right now. And so making certain that we use that platform to advocate for voter engagement, voter information, voter education, voter registration. Most registration deadlines have kind of passed us by now. So now it's not so much as registration as just making certain there's a voter plan to make certain you're voting by by mail, easier than standing in line on the actual voting day. But then there are also communal avenues within every church where people are engaged in conversation and community with one another. It's never just been limited to getting in the building. So, we have small groups, we have ministries that are meeting, we have members that are still fellowshipping with one another, and making certain that we're communicating that through every venue that we know, just make certain that people are planning to vote, that they're planning to vote early, that they're planning to vote by mail. And then, of course, there are those who are going to wait until the actual voting day. So I think we have to utilize those platforms where we are still having opportunities of communication with our members. And that has seemed to work very well for us here at this point. Most of those who are in church, to be honest with you, know how critical this election is. Most of those who are in church know it's their civic responsibility. So it's about making certain we empower them for intimidation and suppression tactics, and just make sure that they have a voter plan.
Mm-hmm. How do you know that you have been successful in getting the message out? Now, I've heard your sermon. I heard you last Sunday. Okay, but how do you know? Other than being led by the Spirit, how do you, what are the metrics that say that you've been successful in getting the word out?
Well, we have a saying at Alpha Street: in God we trust, everybody else needs data. So we believe in the real numbers and the metrics. So two things I would say. One is that there's a movement within our own church that I'm very grateful for, that when you join Alfred Street, we also want to ensure that you are registered to vote, that we don't believe you should be eligible to vote and eligible to be a member, and those two not be synonymous. So we are pushing registration at the moment of membership. But then number two, I preached a sermon recently that, kind of caught some attention, and Ricky Smiley was playing it. And to hear the testimony of a brother who's 43 years old, who says, I have never voted before, but based upon what I heard Pastor Wesley say, I'm registering and I'm going to vote for the very first time. that to me is a victory. If that's the only brother I ever reached who's 43, has never voted, but has made a decision he's going to vote in this election, Harold, I consider that a win if no one else hears the message.
Michael, at the other end of the spectrum, your constituency is the young, the first year voters, those who are just over 18, those are in their 20s. How do you get the message out to those young people who, like that 43-year-old, maybe doing it for the first time or even on the fence about voting now?
Yeah, we find ourselves in a very unique situation this upcoming election, because with school being virtual, that means we have our students across the nation right now. And so it gives an opportunity for not only to use our voice through our votes normally where we would be in DC, but it gives us the opportunity to participate and support bringing our communities out to vote. And remembering that our communities back home, that there's a lot at stake on the ballot outside of just the presidential election. And so that's one of the core motivating factors, is that students know about their home, they know about their community, they care about their community. And while they might not like everything that's going on, or they might not want to pay attention to politics like that, they care about who's making sure that their old school district is getting the money that goes towards that district. They care about making sure that the roads are paved, that the street lights are on. And so resonating with that experience growing up in school, that's what's so key towards wanting to get folks out to vote. Just remembering that there's so much on the line this election.
How old are you, Michael, if I may ask?
I'm 21.
Okay, you're 21. When you talk to young Black men your age, do you get any pushback from them about their vote counting, or rather not counting and not bothering to vote? And if so, what do you tell them?
Yeah, there's a lot of apathy when it comes towards trying to get folks out to vote. And one of the arguments that I always try to use is that when it comes to using your vote, it's not the only thing that you can do. You should be putting your money where your mouth is. You should be organizing in your community. You should be out trying to help build that type of collective power. But our vote is just one of those tools that we can use. And it's not going to stop any of the other work that you're doing out in the community, because some might say that, oh, voting can't do that much, but voting still does something at the end of the day. A vote doesn't take away from the work you're doing. A vote doesn't do anything at all. And that's why it's so important that we try and get students to participate, because we kind of view, like, especially when it comes towards reaching out to young people and students, there's two groups that you're working with. You have the students who are registered to vote and super excited already and are going to vote no matter what. And then you have the apprehensive group who they kind of know what's going on, but they need that extra push over the edge to try and get out and vote. So with those students, that's where we're trying to make that compelling case, really tell folks what's at stake, talking to them about what matters. While the folks who we already know are going to be out there voting, we try to make sure that, hey, you can do even more. You can be a poll worker. You can go and protect the polls too.
Mm-hmm. Girl, can I throw something in there?
Go ahead, please.
So, I deal with a lot of young Black men and have heard that same argument that it's not going to make a difference. One thing I think young Black men share in common is a frustration with the death and police brutality and over aggressiveness that we see has claimed too many young Black male lives. Now, it's not just men, it's affected our sisters as well, but there is a frustration there. And one of the things I remind them is, number one, your vote will affect who becomes judges. That as we vote, we determine the president who places, like this president has placed more judges on the bench than any president other than Jimmy Carter. And he's placing people on the bench who reflect his ideology. So if you're not voting, number one, you're not having any impact on the judges. Number two, you're not having an impact on the Commonwealth attorneys. Where justice begins and fails are with those who make a decision of who's indicted, who gets a pass, and who gets a plea bargain. And those are the Commonwealth, the district, and the state's attorneys who are elected by the people. So when we're frustrated with Breonna Taylor's lack of justice for her death, Daniel Cameron needs to be voted out. And if you as a Black man are frustrated by the lack of justice for Breonna Taylor, you need to cast your vote and vote Daniel Cameron out of office. Then number 3, if you're not voting, you're not eligible for a jury pool. That is so critical. So when we hear that there was no indictment by a grand jury, well, heck, if you don't vote, you're not even in the room to make a decision on whether those officers should be held accountable or whether there should be charges against this person or that person for a crime. So when we vote, we rob ourselves of the judges, we rob ourselves of those who make the decision of the indictment, and we rob ourselves of being on the jury. And that is even more critical than the presidential election for young Black men.
And not just your county jury, or we're also talking about federal court cases for which you may be a grand juror or in a criminal case as well. And so Pastor Wesley, you make an excellent point. We just had a pop-up of one of our watchers. Odetta said that absentee voting is safe. She took her ballot directly to the Board of Elections. 3 days later, she received a confirmation via email. So Natasha, Odetta, a Black woman, she had a plan, she had a purpose, she was on point, bravo, Odetta. But to that point, she is one of millions of Black women,
yes,
who have really turned the tide in midterm elections and in past general elections, during the presidential elections. Again, from your perspective, why is the Black woman vote arguably the most important constituency for voting this year, or actually any other in the recent past?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Black women lead in voter turnout. Here at Black Girls Vote, we often say, Black girls vote. It's not just our call to action, but it's a concrete fact. It was Black women who delivered the presidency for President Obama in 2008 as well as 2012. And it was actually Dr. Dana who mentioned in the previous panel that really the power of the Black woman's vote is the fact that we do not go and cast our ballot alone. We are bringing with us our daughters, our mothers, our siblings. We really make it a community effort. I know personally, I remember every election going with my mom and, helping her pull the lever back in the day. And so it really is a community activity for Black women, recognizing that we do lead in voter turnout and honestly are really the backbone of civics in the U.S.
That is such an important thing when you were talking about, sisters and moms and daughters. My daughter's 22. She graduated from Howard in May, and she's registered to vote. I see you, Michael. There you go. That's right. Third generation HBCU. Love the girl. But she's no longer a girl. She's a young woman. And she, asked for her mail-in ballot, and she's called, Dad, did it come today? And nothing makes me happier, nothing makes me prouder, because this is her third time voting, because she made it under the wire in Maryland as a 17-year-old, because her birthday was in that sweet spot. And then she voted again in the midterm, and now here she is again the third time. The first time, her mother and I and the rest of the family, we said, this is what you must do. The second time, Michael, she was in school. And she had term papers and all of this other stuff, but I put it in her mind, this is what you must do. And she didn't forget. Now that she is a young woman at 22, now she's asking me, she's doing Dad, this is what I must do. And so, yes, that is Natasha, my Black girl, who is voting.
Yes, it absolutely. It's really part of, our culture and our community, making sure that we're casting our ballots and, having that call to action for our family and friends. So, and I kudos to you for helping to cultivate that, the next generation of voters and civic leaders.
No, absolutely. And, if she doesn't vote, she doesn't get an allowance. So, but all jokes aside, though, Michael, what is the thing that concerns you the most as we look at this really critical time? You bring a really unique perspective because you are from the Midwest. You are from Kansas City, Kansas. It's a very different kind of culture, attitude, thought process than in Washington, D.C. Talk to me about the different dynamics and what may concern you as we move to November 3rd.
Yeah, I think the dynamic that concerns me is that we're in a global pandemic right now. And so you can't be as in your face with folks and like, hey, have you registered to vote? Have you made your plan to vote? Are you going out to vote? You can't be knocking on doors. You can't be running up on people like, hey, go vote. And that really changes the game in terms of everything you're trying to do this election cycle. So I remember my first election was in the 2018 midterms. And I remember getting my mail-in ballot while I'm on campus to make sure I'm able to vote back home. But I remember that 2016 election too, where I couldn't vote yet, but we still had voter registration drives going on at my high school and making sure that the folks who were old enough to vote would be able to vote. Because sometimes it's just having that in-person interaction, just one conversation that it takes with someone. And suddenly they're like, all right, that doesn't seem like so much of a chore, like I can get registered right here, right now. I can fill out that form. I got you. While it's different when it's sending a text or an email, and that takes someone having to first open the email, which, everybody gets a ton of emails as it is. So sometimes people aren't going to open that email. Or if it's getting a text like, hey, have you registered to vote? If they don't know you directly and you're just kind of one of those, if you're one of the like texting accounts where it's texting like, hey, it's whoever from wherever, have you registered to vote? Folks probably aren't going to respond to those messages. That's why it takes that reaching out to your friends, your family directly and being like, hey, you know me, you know my number, you know where this is coming from. Are you registered to vote? Do you have your plan to vote early? What are you planning on doing? Because the clock is ticking and like we have to get it together.
For those who are watching or maybe watching this later, because you will be able to go to the WHUR social media platforms and see this later on. But as this is happening live, the FBI is holding a press conference talking about foreign governments trying to sabotage the elections. Pastor Wesley, here we go again. This is something that you have been very vocal about, not only from the pulpit, but even outside. What do you tell your parishioners, your congregation, about these outside forces that are trying to influence the vote, particularly the Black vote, where we see the craziness on social media, where we find out that this guy isn't a Trump supporter or this person isn't a Biden supporter, but they put a face up that person has no association with regarding their political affiliation?
It's first of all, it's a real problem, and I think we need to acknowledge that there has been interference with elections. So for me, it's about maturing our membership to not be two things here. One, not be swayed by social media. There's something called the eye test. Trust what your eyes see and what you believe about these two different candidates who are running for the highest office. I'm not going to be persuaded by a celebrity endorsement. I'm not going to be persuaded by someone of my color and my kind endorsing this candidate or that. I need to be educated and informed myself as to what's happening in our land and where I believe our land needs to go and which candidate is going to take us there. So number one, to be certain that we understand social media is not journalism. It is not a true accounting of facts. It is not truth. As a matter of fact, that's the greatest question we see in the Bible when Pilate is interacting with Jesus. What is truth? And in today's world, you cannot trust that Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any other social media platform is going to give you truth. Number two, I want to encourage everyone to be more than a one-issue voter. I think it's so easy to limit your ballot to one particular issue, whether it be pro-life, whether it be Black Lives Matter, whether it be Second Amendment rights, whether it be universal health care, whether it be the economy. And I think we do damage to our land when we allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into one issue, because that's the easiest way for social media and outside influences to push you, is to make you believe that a certain candidate or a certain celebrity is behind one issue, and that's the only issue you care about. So I'm challenging all who are watching us now and in conversation we have with others to be certain that we are broader, that we are educated voters, and that we're not voting simply on one issue. No candidate is going to support or believe in all 10 issues that are important to me, but I'm not going to choose a candidate simply based on one.
But hold on, though. You said you are not one to listen to a celebrity, but and over there in Alexandria, you're Pastor Wesley, and you are, if not a celebrity, a person of influence. Natasha in Black Girls Vote, within certain circles, she may not be a celebrity, but she may be a person of influence. Michael, on Howard's campus, maybe not a celebrity, but certainly a person of influence. Charlemagne the God, P. Diddy, Ice Cube, all of these people making statements about who you should vote for or that you should just vote. So why not pay attention to the celebrities' influencers?
So here, you're going to push, and then I want to hear from other.
Can I push it?
Because I realize, but you got to get me in trouble. So I ask this question: what is the body of work of a certain celebrity that makes them worthy to represent the community issues and Black issues that are important to me? I mean no harm. Why in the world would I listen to Sean Combs? Listen, great Bad Boy. I love Bad Boy, but you've done nothing for the Black community. Ice Cube, you've done nothing for the Black community. You have no right. No one elected you to speak on our behalf. These people on this panel are on the groundwork. They're on the floor doing the work with the real people, advocating for justice, advocating for voting. So I think we become a culture that's overly infatuated with celebrity, and celebrity means nothing to me. What's your body of work? Harold, we've got the body of work at Alfred Street. The other panelists on here have the body of work that shows that they care about the Black community. What has Sean Combs or Ice Cube ever done to show they care about the Black community? They care about their bottom line and their dollar. But Sean Combs is on the record saying he's going to hold his vote hostage until one candidate gives him the assurances he wants. Man, get out of here, man. Go sit down, go back to your studio, keep recording records, and stay out of a field you have no business being in.
Ooh, child. Okay.
Sorry,
Michael. I have about 4 minutes left. You're nodding your head. I'll let you start with some final thoughts.
Yeah. So, like, even getting back onto the word of like celebrities and their platform, I think we often make an argument when it comes towards individuals who aren't doing enough with their platform. And no, it's not like I'm about to listen to you when it comes towards like who you're voting for or who you're electing, but it comes to the matter of making sure that you're able to be using your platform responsibly and like making sure that you're being civically active, civically engaged, because that's what everyone needs to be doing. They need to be setting that example in terms of wanting to be civically engaged. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, I think when it comes towards getting out the vote, like when it comes to some of the organizing we've been doing on campus virtually, it's like if we have something that's called a get out the vote rally, like there's going to be people who just aren't going to go to that because they see that title and they're just like, a get out the vote rally, that's boring. But if it's something where it's all right, we got an HBCU house party or we have something fun going on And then we're going to have like some of your favorite celebrities urging you to go out and vote, urging you to go out and be civically engaged. Suddenly you're hearing from new folks and encouraging folks who might not normally go to a get out the vote rally towards at least being in those spaces, being encouraged to be civically engaged. Okay. So I think we have to just balance the work we're doing in order to get folks excited.
Okay. Natasha, I've got a good 40 seconds for you. Last word.
Sure. So I agree that we all have a role to play in the civics in our society. You know, everyone has one vote to represent their voice and perspective on issues. And I think that as it pertains to celebrities getting involved in the democratic and political process, they have a responsibility to amplify the voices and perspectives of those of us in the democracy space who are putting the work in and really engaging voters and citizens in the streets where they are. So definitely, you know, appreciate the opportunity to join you all today and this fantastic discussion.
Thank you so much. Pastor, I'm afraid to say let you close, but I'll give you 15 seconds.
Vote.
There you go. Look, now that is a short and poignant sermon. Thank you. Thank you all so much. We are out of time. Tonight is the final debate for the two presidential candidates. Your last chance to compare the White House hopefuls side by side before November 3rd. As always, we never tell you how to vote, but we encourage you to not just talk about it, vote about it. This has been a special Get Out the Vote Daily Drum. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us this evening. For a list of voting resources inside our voter guide, go to WHUR.com and WHUT.org/vote2020 for everything you need to know about poll hours, early voting deadlines, and polling places. Don't forget, November 3rd, it's your turn to be heard. I'm Harold Fisher. Thank you for being a part of the solution. Good night.